The cafe was unusually calm that morning. Soft light filtered through the tall windows, catching the steam rising from freshly brewed coffee. Cups clinked gently behind the counter, and low conversations blended with the steady hum of the espresso machine. It was the kind of morning that felt predictable, safe, almost invisible. Nothing suggested it would become memorable. Behind the counter stood Angela, the shift manager. She moved with quiet confidence, checking receipts, adjusting chairs, and greeting regulars by name. She had learned long ago that a cafe ran best when order was invisible, when problems were solved before anyone noticed them. To most customers, she was just another employee in an apron. To her staff, she was the one who kept things steady. The door opened with a soft chime. A man stepped inside, pausing briefly as if adjusting to the warmth. He wore a faded military jacket, its edges worn smooth by time. His posture was rigid, practiced, and his expression guarded. In his hand was a leash, and beside him walked a German shepherd, calm and alert, its movements disciplined, almost professional. A few heads turned. The dog stayed close to the man's side, sitting when he stopped, eyes scanning the room without aggression. The man nodded politely toward the counter, waiting his turn. He didn't ask for attention. He didn't explain himself. He simply stood there, like someone used to being overlooked or misunderstood. Angela noticed them immediately. Not with alarm, but awareness. She watched the way the dog behaved, the way the man kept his distance from others, the way his shoulders tightened slightly as people stared. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't a problem. It was just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things made people uneasy. A woman near the window leaned closer to her friend and whispered something. Another customer shifted in his seat, eyes lingering on the dog longer than necessary. The atmosphere changed, not sharply, but subtly, like a temperature drop no one acknowledged. Angela stepped out from behind the counter and offered a calm smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady. "You're welcome to order whenever you're ready." The man returned the smile, small but sincere. "Thank you," he replied quietly. He ordered a simple coffee. Black, no extras. As Angela rang it up, she noticed his hands, steady, but marked by old scars. The kind that told stories without asking to be heard. The dog sat perfectly still at his feet, trained, patient, unfazed by the stares. That was when another presence made itself known. From a table near the center of the cafe, a man in a tailored suit leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His jaw tightened as he watched the scene unfold. His coffee sat untouched in front of him. He didn't speak yet, but his eyes stayed locked on the dog. And the quiet morning, once ordinary, began to feel fragile, like something was about to break. The cafe remained quiet, but the feeling inside it had shifted. Angela handed the man his coffee and nodded once more before turning back to the counter. From the outside, everything still looked normal. Cups were filled, orders were called out, people scrolled through their phones. But beneath that routine, something uncomfortable had settled into the room. The man in the suit continued to stare. He sat upright now, his attention fixed not on his drink, but on the dog resting beside the veteran's chair. His expression wasn't fear. It was irritation, tight, controlled, and growing by the second. He glanced around, as if waiting for someone else to say what he was already thinking. No one did. A couple near the window lowered their voices. Someone shifted their chair slightly farther away. The dog remained still, its leash loose in the veteran's hand. The man gently rested his boot against the chair leg, grounding himself, eyes down, as if he had learned long ago not to react too quickly. Angela noticed all of it. She watched the way the suited man's jaw clenched, the way his eyes flicked toward her, then back to the dog, as though measuring how far he could go. She had seen this kind of tension before, not loud, not obvious, but heavy enough to pull the air downward. Finally, the man in the suit stood. He didn't raise his voice at first. He cleared his throat, loud enough to draw attention, and gestured vaguely toward the veteran's table. "Excuse me," he said, forcing a polite tone that didn't quite hold. "Is that allowed?" A few heads turned. Angela looked up from the register. "Is there a problem?" she asked calmly. The man's smile was thin. "I didn't realize this place let animals roam around where people eat." The word animals landed harder than he intended, or maybe exactly as intended. The veteran stiffened. His hand tightened on the leash. Not to pull the dog closer, but to keep himself steady. He didn't look up. He didn't argue. He had learned, through experience, that defending himself too early only made things worse. Angela stepped out from behind the counter again. "That's a service dog," she said, her voice even. "He's allowed to be here." The man scoffed softly. "Service dog or not, some of us didn't come here to be uncomfortable." The room went quiet. Angela held his gaze. "Everyone here deserves to feel comfortable," she replied, "including him." The dog lifted its head briefly, ears alert, then settled again, perfectly calm, better behaved than most of the people watching. The suited man crossed his arms. "Then maybe I should speak to whoever's in charge." Angela didn't hesitate. "You are," she said. "I'm the manager on duty." For the first time that morning, the tension was no longer subtle. It was out in the open. For a moment, no one spoke. The cafe felt smaller now, as if the walls had drawn closer. Angela stood her ground near the counter, her posture steady, her expression calm. She had dealt with difficult customers before. But this was different. This wasn't about a wrong order or a long wait. This was about who was allowed to exist comfortably in the room. The man in the suit let out a short laugh. "So you're really saying I just have to accept this?" Angela didn't raise her voice. "I'm saying the dog is permitted here," she replied, "and the customer has done nothing wrong." The suited man shook his head, stepping closer to the counter. "I come here every week," he said. "I spend good money here. And now I'm supposed to sit next to a dog like this is normal?" A few customers looked away. Others watched closely, frozen between curiosity and discomfort. The veteran finally looked up. His eyes were tired, but clear. "Sir," he said quietly, "he's trained. He won't bother anyone." The man in the suit turned toward him sharply. "I wasn't talking to you." The words hung in the air. Angela moved instantly, positioning herself between the two men, not aggressively, but deliberately. "There's no need for that," she said. "He's a guest here, same as you." The dog sensed the shift in energy and stood, then sat again at the veteran's side. Disciplined, silent. It didn't bark. It didn't move forward. Its presence only seemed to highlight how unnecessary the anger was. "That thing makes people nervous," the suited man snapped. "Look around." Angela did look around. She saw discomfort, yes, but not from the dog. She saw people uneasy with conflict, with confrontation, with being asked, silently, to choose a side. "This cafe follows the law," Angela said. "Service animals are allowed. That's not negotiable." The man's face hardened. "Then maybe I should call corporate." "You're free to do that," Angela answered, "but the policy won't change." His voice rose. "So you're choosing him over paying customers?" Angela didn't pause. "I'm choosing to treat everyone fairly." That was when the man slammed his hand against the counter. The sharp sound echoed through the cafe, causing a few customers to flinch. Conversation stopped completely now. Even the espresso machine seemed too loud. "This is unbelievable," he said. "I want your name." Angela met his glare. "My name is Angela," she said evenly, "and I'm the manager on duty." The veteran shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "I can leave," he murmured. "I don't want trouble." Angela turned to him, her voice softer now. "You don't have to." She faced the suited man again. "If anyone's uncomfortable," she said, "they're welcome to leave, but I won't ask him to." The cafe was silent. And for the first time, everyone understood that this situation was no longer about a dog. It was about principle. The silence that followed felt heavier than the argument itself. Angela stood still, her hands resting lightly at her sides. She could feel the eyes in the room on her back, customers, staff, even the veteran and his dog. This was the moment when people usually softened their stance, when they apologized, compromised, or stepped aside to keep things moving. Angela didn't. She had learned early in her career that authority wasn't about volume or intimidation. It was about consistency. And once you bent that, even once, you never fully got it back. "I want to be very clear," she said, her voice calm but firm. "He is allowed to be here. That's not a personal decision. That's policy." The man in the suit laughed again, louder this time. Policy written by people who don't have to deal with the consequences. He replied, "Look around. You're upsetting everyone." Angela glanced toward the staff behind the counter. A young barista avoided eye contact. Another stood frozen, hands clenched around a towel. They weren't upset by the dog. They were afraid of the conflict. She turned back to the man. "No one has complained except you," she said, "and the dog has behaved better than anyone else in this room." A murmur rippled through the cafe. The veteran shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Ma'am, really," he said quietly, "I don't want to cause a scene. I can take my coffee to go." Angela walked over to his table. "You came in for a coffee," she said gently. "You should be able to sit and drink it." She looked down at the dog, who sat alert but relaxed. Tail still, eyes attentive, and he's doing exactly what he's trained to do. The man in the suit scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're choosing sides." Angela straightened. "I'm choosing standards," she said. "There's a difference." He took a step back, pulling out his phone. "I hope you're ready to explain this to your boss." Angela nodded once. "I will." For a brief moment, doubt flickered across her face, not fear, but awareness. She knew what this could cost her. She knew how easily situations like this were reframed later, stripped of context and turned into a problem she caused. But she also knew what it cost to stay silent. The veteran lowered his gaze, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of attention. "I appreciate you," he said softly, "but I don't want you getting in trouble because of me." Angela met his eyes. "You're not the problem," she replied. The suited man pointed toward the door. "If that dog stays, I'm leaving." Angela didn't hesitate. "That's your choice." The words landed clean and final. No anger, no apology. Just a line drawn where it needed to be. And everyone in the cafe understood that whatever happened next, it wouldn't be quiet. The man in the suit didn't leave. Instead, he stood there for a moment, phone still in his hand, as if waiting for Angela to take back what she had just said. When she didn't, his expression hardened. "This is how you run a business?" he asked loudly. "Embarrassing paying customers?" Heads turned from every corner of the cafe now. There was no pretending this wasn't happening. The tension that had been contained finally spilled into the open. Angela kept her voice level. "No one is being embarrassed," she said. "I've explained the policy." "Policy," the man repeated sharply. "You hide behind that word like it makes you untouchable." A woman near the counter shifted uncomfortably. Someone at the back picked up their phone, the screen lighting up in the dim space. The argument had crossed a line. It was no longer private. The veteran lowered his head, shoulders tight. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "I fought for this country," he said quietly, not raising his voice. "I didn't ask for special treatment." The man in the suit snapped his head toward him. "No one asked about your past." Angela stepped forward immediately. "That's enough," she said. "You don't get to speak to him like that." The suited man scoffed. "And you don't get to tell me how to speak in a place I'm paying to be in." Angela didn't flinch. "I absolutely do," she replied, "when it crosses into disrespect." The room went silent again, thicker than before. The dog stayed close to the veteran's leg, sensing the raised voices but remaining calm. Its stillness only sharpened the contrast between behavior and accusation. "This is a liability," the man continued, his voice rising. "If something happens, whose fault will it be? Yours?" Angela nodded once. "Yes," she said, "mine." That answer caught him off guard. "You're willing to risk your job over this?" he asked. Angela took a slow breath. "I'm willing to do my job." The man laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable." He turned slightly, addressing the room now instead of just her. "Is anyone else okay with this?" No one responded. Some people avoided his gaze. Others watched Angela carefully. Not one person spoke in support of him. "That tells me everything," he muttered. He walked toward the counter, leaning in just enough to feel threatening without being obvious. "I will make sure your boss hears about this," he said. "Every detail." Angela met his stare. "I welcome it." The veteran finally stood, lifting his coffee. "I don't want this turning ugly," he said. "I'll go." Angela shook her head. "You don't need to." But he was already moving toward the door, the dog walking calmly at his side. As he passed Angela, he paused. "Thank you," he said softly, For seeing me." The door closed behind him. The cafe exhaled. But the man in the suit was still standing there, phone in hand, already typing. And Angela knew, this wasn't over. The cafe slowly returned to motion. Cups were cleared, orders resumed, conversations picked up again, quieter than before. To most customers, the moment had passed, but for Angela, it was only beginning. A few minutes later, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach tighten. Office. Now. She handed the counter to another staff member and walked toward the back hallway. The sounds of the cafe faded as she pushed open the door leading to the small office behind the kitchen. It was a cramped space, 2 chairs, a desk, and a computer that hummed constantly. No windows, no room for misunderstanding. Her supervisor, Mr. Collins, stood near the desk, arms crossed. The complaint came in fast. He said without greeting, very fast. Angela closed the door behind her. I expected that. He exhaled sharply. He's a regular, corporate client, spends a lot here. So do others, Angela replied calmly. Mr. Collins rubbed his temple. This didn't have to become a scene. Angela met his eyes. I didn't make it one. He hesitated. You could have handled it differently. She nodded once. I handled it correctly. The silence between them stretched. He claims you were hostile, Mr. Collins said, that you refused to accommodate him. I enforced policy, Angela answered. Service animals are allowed. The dog was trained. There was no disruption. Mr. Collins sighed. That may be true, but perception matters. Angela felt the weight of those words. She had heard them before. Perception, the thing that shifted blame without changing facts. So what would you have preferred? She asked. That I ask the veteran to leave? Mr. Collins didn't answer immediately. That's what this is about. Angela continued. You wanted me to choose convenience over principle. That's not fair, he said quickly. It's accurate, she replied. He looked away, jaw tight. Corporate doesn't like complaints that go public. Angela nodded. Neither do I. They want accountability, he said. They want to know why you escalated the situation. I didn't escalate it, Angela said evenly. I refused to back down. Mr. Collins leaned against the desk. Angela, sometimes being right still costs. She absorbed that quietly. She knew what he meant. She had lived it. If protecting a customer costs me my position, she said, then that position isn't worth keeping. The words surprised even her. Mr. Collins studied her for a long moment. You realize what you're risking? Yes, she said, and I'd do it again. Outside the office, the cafe continued its rhythm, unaware that a decision was forming behind a closed door. And Angela understood something clearly now. Whatever happened next wouldn't be about policy. It would be about consequences. Angela returned to the cafe floor feeling heavier than when she had left it. Nothing looked different. The same tables, the same soft background music, the same smell of coffee in the air. Customers sat where they had before, some unaware of what had happened, others pretending not to notice her at all. From the outside, the cafe had already moved on. She hadn't. Mr. Collins followed her out a few minutes later. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't call attention. He simply motioned for her to step aside, toward the small space near the storage shelves where staff usually kept their bags. This won't take long, he said quietly. Angela nodded. I spoke with corporate, he continued. They reviewed the situation. She waited. They don't feel you exercised good judgment, he said. They believe the conflict could have been avoided. Angela met his eyes. By asking the wrong person to leave. Mr. Collins didn't deny it. They've decided to let you go, he said, effective immediately. The words landed cleanly, without drama, no shouting, no warning, just a decision, already made. Angela felt a brief tightening in her chest, not shock, but recognition. Somewhere deep down, she had known this was coming. So that's it? She asked. He nodded. I'm sorry. She studied his face. He looked uncomfortable, but resolved. This wasn't personal. That almost made it worse. Angela reached up and untied her apron, folding it carefully instead of letting it drop. She placed it on the counter beside her, smoothing the fabric as if she were finishing a shift like any other. "I need my things," she said. Mr. Collins stepped aside. As she walked to the back room, a few staff members watched her quietly. No one spoke. One barista swallowed hard. Another looked down at the floor. Angela gathered her bag and jacket. She paused for a moment, steadying herself. Losing a job was never easy, but losing it for doing what felt right carried its own kind of weight. When she returned to the front, Mr. Collins was already at the register, avoiding her gaze. She took a final look around the cafe. This place had been part of her routine, her stability, and now, in a matter of minutes, it was no longer hers. Angela walked toward the door. Just before she left, one of the younger employees spoke up, barely above a whisper. "You did the right thing." Angela stopped and turned back. She smiled, not wide, not forced, but real. "Remember that," she said. Then she stepped outside. The door closed softly behind her, the bell chiming one last time. Inside, the cafe continued as usual. But something had changed. And none of them knew yet just how much. The cafe felt different after Angela left. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. The rhythm was off. Orders were still taken. Coffee was still poured, but the energy that had once kept things steady was gone, replaced by an uneasy quiet that settled into every corner of the room. Mr. Collins remained behind the counter, filling in where he could. He followed the routine carefully, as if precision might restore normalcy. It didn't. A few customers whispered to one another. Some glanced toward the door Angela had walked through, then quickly looked away. Others stared at their phones, scrolling through social media feeds that were already beginning to fill with comments about the incident. Because the story hadn't stayed inside the cafe. Someone had posted about it. A short video, a few lines of text. Nothing dramatic, just enough to raise questions. By mid-morning, the cafe's name was being mentioned in places it had never appeared before. The suited man had already gone. He left shortly after Angela did, satisfied, or at least convinced he had won. His coffee remained untouched on the table, cooling slowly, forgotten. A few minutes later, the door opened again. The veteran stepped back inside. He moved more slowly this time, as if unsure whether he still belonged there. The dog walked calmly beside him, leash loose, posture unchanged. A few heads turned. No one spoke. He approached the counter. "I forgot my receipt," he said quietly. Mr. Collins handed it to him without meeting his eyes. The veteran hesitated. "Is she?" Mr. Collins cleared his throat. "She's no longer with us." The veteran nodded slowly. He didn't look surprised, just disappointed. "That shouldn't have happened," he said. "She stood up for me." Mr. Collins didn't respond. The veteran turned to leave, then stopped. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded bill, placing it on the counter. "For her," he said, "if you can give it to her." Mr. Collins stared at the bill, then nodded once. The veteran walked out, the dog following at his side, calm as ever. The bell chimed softly behind them. The cafe sat in silence for a long moment. A barista finally spoke. "It's not the same without her." No one disagreed. Customers began to leave earlier than usual. Some didn't finish their drinks. A few didn't come back at all. By afternoon, the cafe was quieter than it had been in months. Outside, Angela walked down the street, unaware of how quickly things were shifting behind her. She didn't know about the posts, the messages, the growing conversation online. All she knew was that she had lost her job. What she didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that the story was only beginning to reach the people who mattered most. And soon, the cafe would feel the weight of that. The story didn't spread all at once. It moved quietly at first, shared between friends, passed along in comments, reshaped by people who had never set foot in the cafe. A short clip of the argument. A post describing how a manager was fired for defending a veteran and his service dog. No names at first, just facts, or enough of them. By the next morning, the cafe's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mr. Collins stood behind the counter, answering call after call. Some people were angry, others asked questions. A few wanted to speak to the manager who was fired. When he explained she no longer worked there, the silence on the other end of the line was often worse than the shouting. Across town, Angela sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Messages had begun to come in. Old coworkers, friends, even strangers. I saw what you did. You didn't deserve that. Thank you for standing up. She hadn't posted anything herself. She hadn't told her side. Still, the story had found its way to her. What Angela didn't know was where it was headed next. The veteran, whose name was Robert Hayes, sat in a small office downtown. His service dog resting quietly at his feet. He wasn't a man who enjoyed attention. He had spent years avoiding it. But when someone showed him the post, something in him shifted. That's not how it happened, he said. He reached out to a local veterans organization he had worked with for years. Then to a reporter he trusted. Not to attack the cafe, but to clarify the truth. She didn't make a scene, he said. She protected me. By afternoon, the story had changed. Angela was no longer a difficult employee. She was a manager who followed the law. A woman who chose fairness over convenience. Someone who lost her job because she refused to back down. The cafe's name was now everywhere. Customers posted reviews, some in support, some demanding answers. Former employees shared their own experiences. The post count climbed, the comments multiplied. Inside the cafe, the mood was tense. Mr. Collins watched as people walked in, looked around, then walked back out. Some asked directly, "Is this where that happened?" Others left without ordering. Then a call came in that made him straighten. "Corporate. They want a full report," the voice on the other end said. "And they want it now." Outside, Angela's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated before answering. "Ms. Johnson?" a voice asked. "This is corporate relations. We'd like to talk." Angela closed her eyes briefly. For the first time since she walked out of the cafe, she felt something other than loss. She felt heard. And inside the cafe, the truth was finally catching up to the decision that had been made too quickly. The meeting happened the following morning. Angela sat across from two corporate representatives in a quiet office downtown. There were no raised voices, no defensiveness, just a careful review of timelines, policies, and witness statements. They had already seen the video. They had already read the posts. And they had already spoken with Robert Hayes. "You followed protocol," one of them said plainly. "And you acted within the law." Angela nodded, listening. "We moved too quickly," the other admitted, "and we're prepared to correct that." By noon, the cafe reopened with a notice posted near the entrance. Customers gathered, reading quietly. Some took photos, others waited. Inside, Mr. Collins stood behind the counter. Tense, he hadn't slept much. When the door opened and Angela stepped in, the room went silent. She wasn't wearing an apron. "Not yet." "Angela," Mr. Collins said, clearing his throat. "Corporate wants to speak with everyone." Customers turned. Staff paused mid-motion. A representative stepped forward. "We made a mistake," she said clearly. Angela Johnson was terminated without proper review. Effective immediately. She is reinstated, with full back pay. A ripple moved through the cafe. Angela took a slow breath. Relief washed over her, but she kept her composure. This wasn't about winning. "There's more," the representative continued. "We're also issuing a public apology for how a veteran and his service dog were treated." The door chimed softly. Robert Hayes walked in, his service dog calm at his side. He hadn't announced his arrival. He didn't need to. He nodded toward Angela. "You stood up when it mattered," he said. "I wanted to see how it ended." The representative turned toward him. "Sir, thank you for helping us understand the full picture." From the back of the cafe, a familiar figure shifted. The man in the suit stood abruptly, clearly uncomfortable. The attention was no longer on the dog, or the manager. It was on him. "I think I'll go," he muttered. No one stopped him. As the door closed behind him, Angela finally tied her apron back on. The gesture was simple. The meaning wasn't. Customers applauded, not loudly. Not dramatically, but sincerely. Later that afternoon, business returned, not because people forgot what happened, but because they remembered it. Angela moved through the cafe the way she always had, steady, attentive, unafraid. Robert sat at a corner table, sipping his coffee. The dog lay quietly at his feet. Nothing felt extraordinary anymore. And that was the point. Because the moment had passed. The choice had been made. And the cafe had learned, along with everyone watching, that integrity doesn't always cost you everything. Sometimes, it brings it back.